need to say here. This is Why Will No One Date These Guys with
Joel guy.
I was about to say Joe, and then I was like, wait, that's not his name.
There's too many J names in the room. I can go by a different name for just today if that is helpful for you.
What's a name that you would like to go by?
Oh, wow, this is a lot of pressure.
I thought this intro was going so well, and then we had to pause for this. And I was like, oh my god, have we mastered it? Has Naomi like gotten it smooth and to the point now?
No. What am I saying? This is going to be like past our year mark too.
Would you like to introduce our guest?
This is Joe Russo, a friend of mine, and the person that's bringing me to Peru this summer.
Woo! That makes it sound like you're just going to Peru with some guy you met on the side of the road. Would you like to go to South America with me?
No. We can invest in the guano mines. I have a special opportunity for you. I have a map to the secret guano gold.
No, but for real, my professor introduced me to Joe. He is a local sexual educator here, or he used to be a sexual educator here in Arizona. So, welcome, Joe Russo. Round of applause.
Oh, thank you. I feel very welcome.
Yeah.
Well, I will pour out a drink if Joe wants to talk about himself in any capacity.
So tell me about yourself. Like, tell me your full name, your age, social security number, ATM
Perfect.
code,
Blood type.
Yeah.
Greatest fears.
Yeah. Vaccines that you got recently.
Oh, never. None. So yeah, my name's Joe Russo. I met Naomi because I currently work at Arizona State University, but I have had a few different jobs all in Arizona in kind of the reproductive health, sexual health education scene. I don't know what else to say about myself.
Let's just jump right in.
Yeah.
High school life. Tell me how that inspired your current job prospects.
My current job prospects. Well, all started when I was born. No, it's funny because going on later in my life to work with teenagers was really when I first realized how insufferable I must have been as a teenager. I know nobody looks back on their teenage years and thinks I was so cool and just great. Maybe
I know
either
I was
of
the
you.
coolest
Yeah.
kid as a child. Everyone was like, Joel, you're the pinnacle of what we think hip teenagers are. You're like Fonzie, hitting the jukebox and then the music starts up. And I'm like, jukeboxes don't exist anymore. And they're like, well, you're kind of a relic of a bygone era.
Tale as old as time. Yeah, I didn't necessarily think I was the coolest kid in high school, but looking back, it's like, oh man, I was a jerk. Yeah, I mean, I specifically thinking about like sex and relationships, all of the stuff that you deal with on this fine podcast, I didn't have anybody really talking to me about that stuff for the most part. I know that, some people say, I grew up in a sex positive home or a really sex negative home. I'd say I grew up in a real sex neutral home where it was just, the less said, or just the less said on it, the better. Like nobody, I was not terrorized into the, having all of this trauma around sexuality. I also wasn't in the household where like there were condoms on the counter. Because I feel like a lot of times you hear like those two extremes, and I was very much in the middle of, I don't know, I at some point got some version of a very abbreviated version of the sex talk, which, yeah, it exists, get over it. And then I was a Mesa Public School product,
Mesa High.
Nice. I was at Dobson. Go Mustangs.
Oh, Dobson.
Dobson, I did speech and debate.
Did you?
I did tournaments at Dobson High School. And Dobson High School was the first school we went to where we were doing congressional debate in the auditoriums. They had all these like sub-auditoriums they'd seal off. And when they were setting up one day, they found used condoms in the back.
Great.
And I was like, that seems about right.
Yeah, good old Dobson.
Can I pause you for just a second?
Yeah, absolutely.
We have not yet tried our drink.
Oh.
Joel has spilled it, but we have not yet tried it.
Well, I cleverly muted my mic so that I could clean it up. And now that it's cleaned up, we can enjoy it. This is Trader Joe's sparkling pink lemonade. I missed the sparkling part, so it came out all carbonated.
It has sparkled.
It tastes pretty mid.
Yeah, I'm unplussed. It's
That
like
tastes
stevia lemonade.
It tastes like lemonade, yep.
So, Dobson High.
Dobson High. And so even at school, I was not, getting a very comprehensive education on any, on the biological side. I knew kind of the basic mechanics, but I wasn't getting anything more than that. And I certainly didn't have anybody talking to me at school about healthy relationships and, even talking one way or the other about dating. And so that's one of the things when I kind of fell backwards into doing this kind of stuff for a living, which I can, it's a whole story I'll get into, but that's really been one of the kind of recurring themes for me is nobody really talked to me about this stuff.
Did you date in high school?
I did. Okay. Yeah. No, I dated a lot in high school. But, and, luckily, I guess, knew enough about how I got through high school without, getting anyone pregnant or having any, big major consequences.
It was a learn as you go kind of thing.
But looking back, it really, I did not have the information that I needed to really be making safe choices. Mm-hmm. And so it's one of those things, I know people who took the exact same risks that I did, and their lives went a really different way because they ended up with an unplanned pregnancy or a sexually transmitted disease or something like that. So
I thought you were saying dating was the risk.
Dating was also the way I did it. It was
yourself up to other people was considered risky.
Frankly, also I was not again big old jerk in high school, so I don't think that I was also particularly a good partner in high school. I know, shocker, teenage boys famously really respectful and responsible, great communicators.
That's the only boyfriends I had in high school.
That's a major recurring theme in our podcast, is how respectful teen boys are.
Yeah.
Well, if I could cut in for a second, I think it's interesting that's your experience, because that was kind of one of the reasons I was looking at going to schools that had majors in sexology. And in junior and senior year, I started reading, and I'm like, oh my god, there's all this information out there. We've been keeping meticulous records about human sexual behavior since at least the 20s, arguably the 1880s, 1860s. And the fact that all of this is not more common knowledge or more commonly discussed just blew my mind. I was like, all this incredible information about the normalcy of human desire is considered still deviant and strange.
Well, I think when you are used to people not talking about it, it can be a real shock that there are people who do. Wait, this isn't taboo for everyone?
Yeah.
What have I been told my whole life?
It was weird, I would say, in freshman year of college, because I think everyone was kind of on the same level, but there were a couple of kids who were just talking openly about sex, and I found that kind of weird. It's wait, you're allowed to do that? You're not supposed to speak about it in hushed terms like all the kids at my high school did?
Yeah, can we just go around the table just very briefly and explain our experience with sex ed in high school? Because I got nothing. Joel?
Yeah.
In 7th grade, there was a section in a biology textbook about the 2 types of reproduction. And there's asexual reproduction, Naomi, and sexual reproduction. And cells, they tend to asexually reproduce, and other organisms tend to sexually reproduce, and that's all I know.
At first, I thought you were talking about the 2 kinds, for humans. And I should have brought a notepad. I've not heard of this. Okay, got it.
Yes, sometimes people can just split in 2 miniature versions of themselves while they're off.
So for me, it was, I think, 6th grade. Divide the boys and the girls. It was the real base, your body is changing talk.
Yeah. Wear deodorant.
Wear deodorant. And then probably 7th or 8th grade, we got a, during gym class, a really uncomfortable, one of the older gym teachers who was in no way trained or prepared to talk about this, except for the fact that he was the person that they made talk about it every year, I'm sure, showed us a video that I don't remember, so it must have really made a big impact on me. And then the one thing I do remember is him very explicitly telling us that if you're not familiar with the girl you're with, because of course, Mesa Public Schools, we're only having sex with women, gentlemen, that you should double bag it. And
what the?
Yeah, right. Which also, 1, what? And 2, if anyone is not aware, is bad advice, you really don't want to do that. You only need the one.
The federal government during World War II was like, our soldiers are going down for the count with all of them getting syphilis at like army bases. We need to provide like proper sexual education. And even though like the people running like the military at the time were super conservative, they still recognized like the need for their soldiers to not get like horrible gaping wounds on their. The privates shouldn't have private issues. And so, like, they provided, like, for the time, what was considered very high-quality sex education, letting them know about the need to use a condom and what to look for in terms of, like, genital afflictions and whatnot. I have no idea where this older gentleman got the idea that it was okay to put 2 condoms on. I don't think anyone has ever said, you know how you, like, be extra safe? 2 condoms.
Well, it's better than saying if you have sex, you're gonna get an STI and you're gonna die.
Yeah.
I feel speculation about safe sex might be worse than lying about safe sex.
Yeah.
Because I think one of the most important things when discussing sex is admitting when you don't know things.
Right? Well, and that's a whole thing, and I think in education in general, that it's just we're not allowed to tell students I don't know, especially things like this.
Really? So I'm sorry, can you talk more about that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think there's a taboo almost with in certain educational philosophies that are more like, I am the authority and the students need to respect my authority. It's this idea of just like, well, you can't admit weakness in front of the enemy. And that was a big thing. So to kind of tell my story out of order a little bit, to flash forward, for a while, I worked for the Arizona Department of Health Services, and I trained pretty much all the health educators who were being funded through the state. So there's a lot of people doing sexual health education around Arizona. All of the ones that were through us, we did trainings for, and it was a big thing that we really emphasized and taught how to answer questions is, you don't lie and you don't make something up. And even if you're like 90% sure, don't present it as if you're 100% sure. I fully encourage you to say, I don't know, but I'll get back to you. Because not only does it mean that you're not going to give bad information to some kid who is asking a question. Well, I mean, what a great opportunity that is. Someone's actually open to information. Don't give them the wrong information, but also, personally, I think it's a cool like modeling opportunity for an adult to say, I don't know, because like, hey, and that's okay. You don't have to know everything. Yeah. And I know I have colleagues or friends who are teachers in other subjects as well, that I think maybe there's some generational difference, or like you said, just a difference in philosophy of like, the teacher has to be, perfect, or else the students won't respect their authority, versus, yeah, I'm a human. I think they know that, so it's okay to say, I don't know the answer to that. That's a great question. Let me get back to you.
So you flashed forward.
Yes.
In your timeline. Let's flash back.
Flashback.
So you're between high school and that. So
okay.
How about you just fill in the blanks?
Yeah.
Like what happened after you graduated high school?
I want to be clear, this podcast is not endorsing flashing of any kind.
Yeah.
Not without consent. So I was a horrible teenage boy, as many are, and then in college, from a young age, I was really interested in health, medicine, that whole area. When you're a kid, like 2 health jobs, and so I was like, well, I know what a doctor is. I guess I'll be a doctor, and in that way that
you can't be a nurse.
You can't be a nurse
because you're a dude.
Honestly, I don't even know. I was young enough. It was one of those things where a kid expresses an interest in a job, and all the adults in their life are like, well, this is your personality now. So it's just like, Joey's gonna be a doctor. It may have been a young enough age that I didn't fully know what nurses were. And so, yeah, getting into ASU, that was just kind of the plan for my life. And luckily, I had the opportunity to actually see what doctors do in their day-to-day, and like go follow some doctors around and talk to some doctors. I'm like, oh, this is a really cool job. Super not the job for me, though. And it was about that time I learned more about public health, and so was...
Can I ask you, what was your issues that you had with becoming a doctor?
Yeah, for me, I I thought I knew exactly, I was going to be a pediatric orthopedist at someplace like Phoenix Children's Hospital. And I had the chance for a whole semester, a couple days a week, to go follow around the head pediatric orthopedist at Phoenix Children's Hospital. Like, this was the guy who had the job that I thought I really wanted. And, the big thing, there were a couple. One, he spent so little time with his patients. I mean, he was really hustled in and out of each patient room. It's like if you've seen the movie Birdman, where it's just like it's just like you can't catch your breath. That was following this guy around for a day. And it's just like, oh, I'm exhausted, and I'm not even the one doing any of this. And so, yeah, it was the pace of his day, how little actual interaction that it felt like he got with his patients, and then just how much paperwork he had for each patient. And this guy would, really, really excitedly be like, I think I'll only have a few hours of charting after I get home tonight. How long have you been here? It's like, oh, it's, I've been here good. By the time I'm off, it'll be a good 8-hour day, and then probably just a few hours of homework, essentially. Like, oh, no. And so it was, again, one of those things, like the job that you think what it looks like when you're a kid, and you're a kid, you don't understand. You just think, oh, doctors, they work at a hospital or a clinic or someplace, they make people better. And I mean, it's obviously more complicated than that.
Well, then you watch those shows like Grey's Anatomy.
Yeah, and they're just having sex in the break room.
In the day, and they only have like 3 patients.
Yeah. And that was the other thing, is I didn't see a single torrid love affair. Nobody was yelling about their love triangle while also trying to save a patient from bleeding out. Like, Grey's Anatomy lied to me.
Characters, I thought that was disappointing. There wasn't enough plot development. He wasn't like, oh my god, my twin brother is back from Afghanistan. We thought you were dead, Bill.
Yeah, no, like, really dramatic electric organ chords playing whenever somebody entered a room. No, nothing.
No one was trying
like
to assassinate the doctors outside of Mercy General or whatever.
Not that I noticed, though. It was a children's hospital, so I should hope that things are at least a little tamer over there. And so, yeah, I got a little bit of an introduction to public health in a general sense, and started talking to this professor, and I had a senior project that I needed to do as part of my program, and wanted to do something more public healthy. And one of those conversations that you don't realize kind of like defines your whole life when you're having it. But he, really laid back guy, was like, look, you can focus on whatever you want. I deal with like adolescent sexuality and teen pregnancy, teen sexual education. So if I'm going to be who you're working with, I will be able to help you more if you focus on that. But like, you could focus on nutrition. You could focus on anything. This is what I am an expert in. And if I'm the person you're stuck with, because, you've selected me to work with on this project, you might consider that as a topic. I was like, yeah, honestly, I having the background that I had, this is a really important topic. And the more I thought about it, I was like, yeah, I should do this. But again, it was a school project. And then, yeah, that's kind of, that was the start of something that, again, it kind of defined my whole path from there. Didn't realize at the time. So, because that led into my first job out of college, which led into my next job, and yeah, then now I'm recording a podcast about sex, dating, sex, and relationships. Yeah, this is the culminating point of my career. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I don't know where I'd go from here.
When we were younger, we watched a lot of The Simpsons, and The Simpsons, of course, has all these recurring guest stars. They have like Danny DeVito in the early seasons plays Homer's brother, but then you have other actors who come on and play themselves in The Simpsons. And I always thought when I was younger, you'd have made it as an actor if you get on The Simpsons.
Yeah.
Then The Simpsons has kind of gone downhill in recent years, and so now we could be the thing that people aspire to.
Damn.
Yeah.
You're right.
You've made it if you end up on the podcast with the Guy family.
Which episode is Danny DeVito recording with you guys on?
Oh God, he's coming up in the next one.
I think he's going to do that thing he does on Always Sunny, where he's going to crawl out of our couch.
He's going to talk about body positivity.
Yeah.
Perfect.
He's going to be playing the character Frank from Always Sunny during the entire recording.
Oh, in character.
Yeah.
But in a Spider-Man costume.
which is really good for the audio medium that is podcasts. It'll be the spandex is really going to help come across.
Tell me about your thoughts of Arizona's sexual education. Because I think that...
before it gets into that, Naomi, has there been anything big that's happened in Arizona sex ed in the last couple of years, last couple of months, last couple of weeks?
Yeah.
So let's talk about that. Joel, would you like to introduce this subject?
I don't know the exact content of the bill, but recently, as of recording, this is April 2nd, Doug Ducey passed 2 bills, one of which I think is similar to the Texas bill, but not as wide scope, regarding transitioning and the access of trans individuals to transition therapy. I think there are some limitations placed on chemical treatment, and there's very heavy restrictions placed on actual surgical treatment. And that's very rare for people who are young. The big thing is trans individuals who would like to delay their puberty in order to allow them to make a decision later in life need access to puberty delaying chemicals. And if you take that away from them, the chance that they have depression and or suicide later in life goes up significantly. So that's one thing. There was something involving teaching about gay people. Am I incorrect? I want to say he signed a bill that dealt with
the don't say gay.
It was some variation of that.
And I will admit now, especially since I'm in kind of a different role professionally, school health education is something I don't have my finger as close on the pulse on. But yeah, my understanding is that not quite mirroring all the language in Florida's version of the bill that obviously has been getting a lot of national attention. What's really interesting to me too is I'm sure both of you are familiar, and I would imagine a lot of your audience is familiar with no promo homo legislation, which this reminds me so much of, and especially at the point it's like, guys, we've done this already. So for anyone not familiar, no promo homo, as it is affectionately / not so affectionately referred to, is legislation that basically says in public schools typically these laws exist / have existed because they're getting repealed a lot of places, usually specify in public schools that we cannot basically promote a homosexual lifestyle. I think usually the language is more like we cannot promote homosexual relationships as a healthy alternative or healthy in any way. Again, regardless of the wording in any state specific bill, it's you can't promote homosexuality. You can't convert students to being homosexual, which obviously, like a lot of these bills, doesn't exist to stop something from happening that was happening or has ever happened. I think for a lot of people who consider themselves sexual health educators who are in the field, it paints a really weird picture of what they think we do for a living or what our goals are. Like, okay, well, have you considered converting to homosexuality? Let me here's a pamphlet. We really, we're trying to get the numbers up.
As a sexual educator, you're just spreading the word of Satan.
That's true. Exactly what you're doing. I didn't want to say anything because, again, this is an audio medium, but he did come in wearing a, fitted suit that was just covered with the pride flag. Yeah. And, little devil horns. And I think there's a pitchfork sticking out of his trunk in our driveway. Yeah. Yeah.
I have a holster from the pitchfork in my crotchless chaps that are also rainbow.
A lot of people just stick with assless chaps. Crotchless is a new one for me.
We got to push the envelope if we're going to convert and
yeah. To your point, I think we're forgetting, Naomi, we actually discussed this last year. Ducey signed legislation to, quote, protect transparency in education. So according to the Arizona Office of the Governor on July 9th of 2021, he signed House Bill 2035. The legislation provides parents with an opportunity to, quote, participate in, review, and provide input on any proposed sex education course of study before it is adopted. It also prohibits sex education from occurring in kindergarten through 4th grades. In addition, this bill requires schools to provide parents the opportunity to opt their children into any instruction, learning materials, or presentations related to sexuality in courses other than formal sex education curricula. Under previous law, parents were only able to opt out of this instruction. And now, according to the Office of the Governor, the bill assures that teaching age-appropriate child abuse prevention is not considered sex education. So, oof, I was concerned.
I think we are missing a major law that was signed this week, which was the 15-week abortion ban in Arizona.
Okay. We were talking about sex ed. That's right.
Yeah. So that was another thing that was...
in other news on the real great, exciting legislation that we're all really pleased about this.
So, do you want to talk about your work with Doug Ducey?
No, Doug Ducey and I have never worked directly together, though I guess our closest relationship is that we started at the state the same day.
That's what I was waiting for.
And so...
well, you used to work at Cold Stone. Under Ducey, right?
Yeah, doing sex education, of course.
Yes. While I'm working on your waffle cone, you want to hear about genitals? Would it be mean to spread the rumor that, like, similar to In-N-Out having, like, Bible verses, Cold Stone Creamery provides detailed, graphic, like, illustrations of, like, genitalia on all of its, like, drink cups?
It's not In-N-Out, it's Chick-fil-A.
No, In-N-Out.
Oh, yeah, In-N-Out's they've got their Bible verses, too. It's on the bottom of the fry containers and things.
Mm-hmm.
I just am so distracted by the fries.
Yeah.
So, going back to the original question,
like you sidestepping that submission from your brother entirely.
Tell us your thoughts about sexual education in Arizona.
Will this make your job harder?
Yeah, no, sexual health education in Arizona, like a lot of states, I think one of the biggest things is that there's no standardization. So there's no requirement for schools, especially at the state level, and in general, anything that does exist policy-wise at the state level is going to detract, not add. So we don't, like some states have laws on the books that say, like other subjects, say, students should learn at the very minimum about this topic, and this topic. We don't have any of those kind of standards for sexual health education in the positive definition kind of sense, which does already kind of create this Wild West scenario where every district's kind of on their own. And then the legislation that we do have, again, it's focusing on these things like no promo homo or now don't say gay that are pretending to fix a problem that didn't exist in the first place, either as just a dog whistle, because it's one of those things. If I'm an elected official, I'm a legislator, and I sponsor a bill that says, well, I don't think that Democrats should be able to sacrifice babies to Satan. I'm just saying, I'm just a guy.
I want it on the record, I also agree.
I'm just a guy who doesn't think this should be legal. And it, of course, suggests that is something that's happening. But I didn't say that it's happening. I mean, you can't, I'm not on record of saying that. I just don't think it should happen.
So, Mr. Smith, when did you stop beating your wife?
Yeah, exactly. It's that kind of like, then the idea's out there. And I didn't, say that this was happening widespread. I just don't think it should be legal for it to happen. And what laws we do have tend to focus more on we really shouldn't be doing this in the classroom. It's really not the school's right to do X, Y, and Z. The other thing that we've had for a long time in Arizona is there's for parental consent for any types of things that parents have to agree or consent to allow their children to participate in. There's active consent, there's passive consent. So active consent is by default, the student does not have permission and the parent has to actively consent and opt in. Passive consent is opt out. So by default, students are included unless their parent says otherwise. Typically best practice, what we really like to see is that passive, whereas, active consent just means that not only are there students whose their parents don't want them in sexual health classes, they don't want them getting that information, but also, if a student just wasn't able to get the permission slip signed, or the parents, there's a language barrier, that's something schools work really hard to not have that be an issue. There's parents who are just busy. There's students who frankly don't take things home to their parents or guardians, and so we have a lot of that kind of legislation that a lot of the times it's passed or drafted, it's defended under this kind of mantra of, well, this is for families, protecting the rights of parents. But you'll notice that excerpt that you just read about this latest bill, was that from last session, you said?
Yeah, it was July 2021.
We can say that, this is for the rights of parents, but then there's these broad sweeping things like nothing from K to 4th grade. Well, that doesn't sound like you're letting parents decide. That sounds like the state is deciding for parents. Mm-hmm. So which is it? Because overwhelmingly, and this is something nationwide, but also, my understanding is it's true in Arizona, whenever public polls or evaluation of public opinion, community needs assessments tend to pretty consistently find that most parents are in favor of comprehensive sexual health education, or at least some form of sexual health education being in schools, even if they don't want it for their kids. A lot of the parents are very much in support of this, and that's something that, again, looking at the studies that have been done, the polling that's been done, is very consistent in most parts of the country. And so this legislation, it's always this pearl clutching of like, well, it's for the parents. We got to protect the rights of the parents. But again, a lot of times it's not the parents who are opposing it. So it kind of makes you wonder, if it's not for the parents, then who's it for?
Yeah, if I was a parent, I'd be less concerned about my kid learning about sex and more about them learning about fractions. Those things are really messed up. They wrinkled my brain in ways I don't want to get into. On a serious note, I think it's interesting how you're talking about the legislature prohibiting and creating all these laws that specifically prohibit action. Because on one hand, we have a government that is controlled by individuals in a party that talks a lot about freedom of choice and states' rights and all of that, and they seem to, at least on a theoretical level, talk a lot about the autonomy of towns and cities to do what they want, but then actively prohibit all of this. And in both my job and my time as a sustainability student, one thing that I noticed time and time again is that the state legislature passes bills that prevent cities from doing things that the cities want to do. Yep. And Tempe's attempted to do a plastic bag ban, and that was outlawed by the state legislature. Yep. Legislature is cities cannot do plastic bag bans. Okay, city of Tempe was hey, we want to prevent puppy mills from operating in our city, and we're not going to allow pet stores in our city to operate puppy mills. And I think the state also passed a bill that said, you can't outlaw puppy mills within your city.
We outlaw the outlawing of puppy mills.
Yeah. But then there's other stuff, a lot of cities in the area used to run their own commercial solid waste divisions, picking up dumpsters and whatnot. And the state outlawed them outlawing private haulers from operating within the city. And the cost for solid waste service has gone up substantially because a lot of private haulers will come in with these cherry contracts that say, you'll pay half as much the first year, and then the prices might triple the next year. Yeah. And that's screwed over a lot of apartment complexes and single family projects that are attempting to get a cheaper rate. So it's fascinating that this current seems to run through everything that they do, where it's not about giving people freedom, it's not about giving people autonomy, it's tending to help business and giving people a very specific version of freedom. Their carefully cultivated version of freedom and autonomy and parents' rights, not the thing that, as you're saying, public polling would indicate people actually want.
Well, and absolutely. I mean, I think the other really relevant example is what we saw in the pandemic. And, throughout Arizona, we had either counties or cities trying to follow best practices, public health guidelines, and then, at least for a while, our governor was not allowing cities to have mask mandates. And again, it's one of those things of, wait, I thought this was all about local rule and local authority. Now we have the state stepping in and overriding local leadership and local government. So in general, I think that those are the things that to me really define sexual health education in Arizona. Is it's very piecemeal. And no man's land is very much, I think, the phrase that I would use. It's the Wild West. Every district, and sometimes within a district, every school, sometimes within a school, every classroom, are doing completely different things. Now, the silver lining to that, I guess, if we're being kind of a glass half full, is that means that there are people doing really amazing work around Arizona that are sometimes kind of skirting under the radar. and are able to be delivering really fantastic, comprehensive sexual health. The actual information is very comprehensive, but also they're engaging with students in ways that it's not just about reading off a list of facts about anatomy and about like this is risky, this is less risky, but also talking to young people about healthy relationships, the kinds of things that you talk about here, because a lot of that can also be seen as subversive or dangerous by groups that just wouldn't want us talking about sex or relationships in schools. And so the fact that it's not standardized means that there are people in places within the state that you would not expect doing really fantastic work, but doing it kind of quietly. The unfortunate thing means that the unfortunate side of that is there are places where it's really needed where it's not happening. And it really can be, again, very inconsistent, school by school, classroom by classroom, and year by year. Because if there's a group or an individual teacher that's doing a really great job, but they leave, it's not part of the district's curriculum. So it's not like there's any guarantee that the next teacher is going to be picking up that mantle, unless it's something they also care a lot about and are willing to maybe take on some potential heat from parents, from administration, from school board, whoever.
Yeah, I think it's great that educators occasionally have the opportunity to kind of break the mold and go their own path because of what you're talking about. Because I think one of the biggest issues in sex ed is presentation of facts and not hands-on experiences. It's one thing if the state's like, okay, whatever, teach them about sex, teach them about, STIs, teach them about like healthy relationships. But if it's just a bored gym teacher reading a bunch of facts off of, a notepad, you're not going to learn anything, right? And it's really frustrating, I think, where the state's like, well, we do provide sex ed, but that sex ed isn't something that people are actually going to retain.
Yeah.
So I'm saying, things like, we've discussed this before on the podcast, consent lessons, where women are taught to actually say no and engage with the act of, like, asserting their dominance and their boundaries. Things like putting a condom on a banana, trying out, condoms, doing experiments with condoms where it's like, look, this will fit a wide variety of, eggplants and whatnot.
Yeah.
This proves that guys need to be using condoms. I think those practical things are what, kids actually will learn and what they're actually going to retain. And it's probably for the better that the state doesn't know what's going on in classrooms, because they'd be like, oh my God, children are feeling lubricated condoms and they're seeing women's reproductive organs displayed in graphic 3D detail.
I mean, it's better than showing that birthing video.
Oh God, I had to watch that in like 9th grade biology.
I feel that's great sex ed. Showing kids like the actual consequences of pregnancy, because like you'll see pregnancy subplots on TV shows, and sometimes they're depicted like accurately. Most of the time, it's like, oh my God, I got pregnant, and if they actually do follow through with the pregnancy, it's like, and it just popped out, everything was fine.
Yep.
Well, but
None
it's
of, like,
presented.
actual health effects that might come along with that.
No postpartum depression.
Well, but that's the thing is, at least for me in my class, we didn't get any of the before. We didn't get any of the after. It was, look, don't have sex, and I'm just going to show you the 60 seconds of this video where this baby's stretching, crowning out, and just for the shock value. It was like, that was pretty gross, right? Which also is maybe not how we should be talking about just like women's bodies or the delivery process in general. Talk about instilling trauma in anyone in the room who thinks they may eventually be in a place where they want to deliver a child. I cannot imagine how that has impacted however many generations have gotten that video or the version of it.
I want to push back because we went to a school that was heavily populated by individuals who were Mormon and Catholic. And I'm not saying anything derisive about the religions, but I do find it to be deeply troubling that a lot of the brilliant young women I went to school with, top of the class, best marks, always contributing the most to conversations and having the best grades and doing the most amazing projects, didn't see college as an option. They saw their only future as popping out babies.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's multiple people who I went to school with who immediately after graduation got married, and now
No, went on their mission trip and then they got married.
Okay, that's fair. I'm sorry, I'm jumping the gun.
And they put their 2 years in first.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I do feel having a depiction of the stress and potential trauma that can come with pregnancy is important. Now, to your point, I think it's also worth kind of demystifying genitalia. I think a lot of women raised in religious backgrounds probably have no idea what a clitoris is, and if they do, it's like some dark secret they're not supposed to know about. And if they ring the devil's doorbell, he's gonna come or whatever. I don't know what they say.
Ring the devil's doorbell.
Yeah, look, I read a lot of chick tracts as a youth. I'm well familiar with the terminology they utilize. But yeah, to that point, like I'm sure there's got to be a middle ground between like demystifying sex and like making people acutely aware of the consequences of it. And I'm sure that's why parents don't want comprehensive sex education, because their cultural biases are such that they think, well, as soon as my 17-year-old daughter is out of school, it's time for her to start procreating.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But I all that to say, I think it can be both and, because so one of the things that I think is really interesting, if you look at, there's a whole industry of sexual health curricula, and all people who write these lesson plans and write activities and sell them to groups, whether it's the schools themselves or a third party that goes into the school to provide sexual health education. There's all of these curricula, and they all like to tell, we're evidence-based and we're evaluated, and this has been scientifically proven to be effective. I have a lot of things that I could say about the actual data behind how effective most of those curricula are.
Please give the piece of data that you gave to my class when you came and presented.
Which piece of data?
The sexual
about how they're developed?
Yes.
So this certainly does not speak for every curriculum out there, but there's a couple of groups that are particularly prolific. And if you look at kind of the top, especially the ones that the feds have approved for federal funding, a lot of those curricula come from a very small number of authors or publishing houses. And what's really funny to me is the vast majority of the curricula on that list, or at least the ones that were in use a few years ago when I was kind of more in that whole world and up on that game, are developed with a very specific audience. So they're developed in public schools in the American South, typically with younger adolescents, so like 13 to 16, in classrooms of African American girls. And then they test this curricula in that setting with that group, and then they turn around and say, it works! Let's ship it around the country. Let's ship it around the world. If we translate it in a couple other languages, we can even get it outside of the U.S. And there's huge problems when people try to use these curricula elsewhere, because I don't think that it will shock anyone to hear that, 18 to 19-year-old Spanish-speaking boys in an after-school program are going to be a different audience in a different context than those 13 to 16-year-old African-American girls in a public school in the American South. I mean, it's, yeah. But, yeah.
I do have to bring up a point, is that I think that was developed because of the amount of data that is surrounding the amount of unintended pregnancies among minority women up to that age, between 13 and 16. So, like, it may make sense, yes, for that group, but you also need to, like, understand that, like, there can be other conversations for, like, there's other races out there. I don't know if you knew that.
Well, and some of it is just that's where those groups are, and so that's their backyard, and if they have a relationship with the school district, they go in and, it's not to say that you have to have, like, this perfectly representative sample of the entire U.S. in the classroom, like...
Well, we've been doing this for a century.
Science.
With some solid data.
Yeah, well, we have, generalizability is a thing that we know a thing or two about in science. And this idea of, okay, the test worked with this group. Can we assume it will work with everybody? We know how to do that, or at least we know, how to look closer into that. But a lot of these curricula, for a lot of reasons, both because of how they're developed and how little they're tested with other groups, how wishy-washy, some of the kind of the instructions for how they should be used can be. A lot of these curricula great in terms of their actual impact. There's one or two curricula that have been shown to be really, really, really effective, and at least seem to be kind of effective in a lasting way. It's not we surveyed or we tested these students immediately after the class and can confirm that they're all terrified of sex, but then that goes away 6 months later. Like there are some curricula out there that they've done follow-ups, and it seems like it sticks with the students who go through the program. And the funny thing is, especially the one that was kind of the big program when I was at the state, it's a curriculum called the Teen Outreach Program, was not developed first and foremost as a sexual health education program. It's and really even to this day, that's not how they identify themselves. It's a positive youth development program. And it talks about communication skills and decision making and empowerment. And there is a generous kind of side portion of just the basic information on how bodies work and things like STIs and things. I mean, that's in there, contraceptives, all of that. But case in point, TOP, they call it, TOP has a comprehensive and an abstinence version, and in the testing, both versions were pretty much equally effective, because the sex ed part was really kind of a side note. And what actually was making a difference was it's a long program where students kind of develop a mentor relationship with this facilitator who's working with them every week. And it's more about building their self-efficacy and their self-confidence and their ability to communicate and ask for what they want and form boundaries. And, it's funny because here we're looking for all these quick fix programs of like, but how many pictures of genitalia, like what's the minimum number that I can show these kids before they're just not going to get pregnant anymore? Okay, 5, got it. And then I go in and, they try to take some of these approaches and distill it into like, can we get this done in a week? Because we've got merit testing coming up, and, our school grades.
Merit testing brought up so much vulgar energy in me.
And so even the districts who really feel it's important, it's like, yeah, this is so vital. We really can't spare more than a few days. So if you can just be like, here's a condom, put it on a banana, this is where babies come from, and we're out, because we have other things that, are more important.
What would you say is considered the criteria for efficacy in these programs?
Yeah.
Is it number of pregnancies? Is it number of kids having sex? Is it retention of the knowledge that's taught?
Oh, that's such a good question. And Naomi knows I could talk about this for a long time. Honestly, yes, all of the above, and a lot of it is kind of it depends on what is this program trying to achieve, right? Because what they're trying to achieve, what their central goal is going to determine what success looks like. What is often claimed to be the goal and kind of what we're looking for are more in line with what you just said. So things like the overall pregnancy rate. There will be fewer unintended pregnancies, depending on where the curriculum came from and kind of the background of the authors or the developers. Sometimes it's things like delay of sexual activity. Mm-hmm. And that's not to say that that's necessarily a horrible metric, but there are some groups that focus on it more than others as like the holy grail. Things like use of contraceptives, like when these young people are having sex, are they using contraception? And there's even, in reproductive health, there's like a rating scale of least to most effective method. And a lot of the times, if we're getting really into the nitty gritty, are you moving up on that scale? So if before you were using nothing and now you're, using something, it's not the best method, but something, that's a win. And if before you were using condoms, but now you're using an IUD and condoms, well, it's going from a less effective method to a more effective method. There's a lot of ways that you can look at it, and a lot of ways that people say, well, these are the goals, is we want teens to either not have sex or have safer sex. We want them to feel, either to be able to answer actual knowledge questions and demonstrate that they know more than they did before. And the other thing is they talk a lot about intent it's not, we're going to follow these teens around for the next 5 years and see, like, did you have sex yet? Did you have sex yet? But a lot of these surveys that they give to evaluate these programs, they just ask them, do you intend to have sex in the next year, in the next 5 years? Do you intend to have sex before you're married? Yeah, and so that's, your laugh is a perfect segue, because I really have an issue with, we claim that these are the things that we're trying to achieve and these are the things we're looking for. And then you read the actual evaluation reports, or if they have a survey, you read the actual survey, and knowledge is, I think, a perfect example. They say, well, it's important. This program works because it teaches students and they actually understand, they know more, and we're increasing their knowledge. That's great. Knowledge is power. I feel really strongly about, teaching, even just teenagers knowing more about the nuts and bolts, no pun intended, of sex. A little bit, yeah. That is amazing. And then you read these surveys, and they're not asking it's not like an actual test. It's, do you feel you know more than you used to know? Or before, it's on a scale of 1 to 5, rate how much you know about sex. And then after, they say, on a scale of 1 to 5 now. And there's the average student went from a 2 to a 4. So, pat on the back, we did a good job. Let's call it a day, everybody. Mission accomplished. And so we're saying this is so important and this is what we're measuring. But then you look at the survey, like, you're not measuring that. You're measuring whether students claim to know more.
Whether students are arrogant.
Yeah. Or, the intent to have sex. I'm going to talk to you for a month or 2 months or 3 months about how your sexual health educator, I don't think you should have sex. Now, here's the survey. And number 1 is, are you going to have sex? I don't think it's unreasonable to imply or suggest that maybe some of those students are going to know that, well, Mr. Russo seems really intent that I shouldn't have sex. Mm-hmm. And even though he says this is anonymous, I don't know about that. I'm just going to go ahead and say no, 0 out of 5. So are we measuring their intent to participate in sexual activity, or are we measuring whether they're scared to be honest with me because I've kind of badgered them for a month?
Yeah, that whole methodology, I'm thinking, would be deeply problematic when measuring students from an area that you might argue is uneducated in sex and students in an area you might argue is more educated in sex. Because, you have the whole Dunning-Kruger effect where people who know less are more confident in their abilities. And so I can imagine people who don't know how to put on a condom would rank themselves as more knowledgeable than people who do know how to put on a condom, can name 4 STIs, and can name, 5 different types of birth control or something off the bat. Because the more you know about sex, the more you realize there's more to know about sex. And I think maybe the reason these programs, which lean to abstinence, want to measure it in this way is because when you measure that against programs that are more substantive in areas where people are already more educated by default, you're going to see more of an improvement in the abstinence-based versus the programs where people are more knowledgeable and are receiving better education.
You used the phrase deeply problematic, and you probably could have just stopped there. Because, deeply problematic, and in all of the following ways. Yeah, no, fully agree. I have a whole separate rant, even outside of just sexual health education and adolescence and these kind of programs and evaluation. I could go on for days about just survey data and how much we trust, or how much we prop up survey data as like, well, they told us, so now it's true. A lot has been said, especially I think the other area that there's a lot outside of like risk behaviors that are already like people lie about, have you used drugs? Nope. Things like that, but also...
My God. Yeah. Okay, so I was at the Nurse Center ASU the other day because I had to get my vaccines before we went to Peru. Yeah, I know, I'm so excited. And there's this poster on the door of the doctor's office, and it's like 84% of students at ASU say that they don't drink excessively. And I'm like, who are the students that you're talking to?
Well, and also, so what? 84% of students at ASU said a thing, And all that tells you is that 84% of students said a thing. It doesn't tell you...
Why do they feel that they need to put it on a poster?
Yeah. Also...
And who would go out of their way and be like, I drink excessively.
Well,
right?
everyone has at least one friend who, and this is just a hypothetical, not based on any of the people I knew in my freshman year, might have taken a pitcher of rum and coke to class every day of the week. And so in comparison, whatever alcohol young, less than 21-year-old Joel may have consumed would be less than the excessive amount of alcohol from this person. And if he knew 30 people could truthfully say, in comparison to her, I do not drink excessively. In fact, I might argue I need to start drinking more just to keep up with him.
Yeah. Well, and so that on that topic, the other area that I won't delve too much into this because I know this is getting kind of way off topic, but nutrition, all those surveys were just like, how often do you eat vegetables in the last 6 months? Like, all the time. I eat so many vegetables, you guys.
It's all like based off of what you think.
Yeah.
Like a lot of alcohol is, or what you think a lot of vegetables is. Like growing up, drinking excessively could be you're blacking out every single night. But in my mind, drinking excessively is you're getting drunk on a very, very regular basis.
Yeah.
So, I would like to wrap up this episode because we're about to do a two-parter, but I would like to ask you a question.
Got it.
Do you have any specific organizations that you would like to plug?
Always. I thought about this because I knew that knew I was gonna. It's like the pressure to call out my faves. So I think the two, especially with the work that they're doing right now. First, Arizona Public Health Association, always and forever. Really, I mean, have always done really fantastic work, but especially both around the last 2 or 3 legislative sessions we've had have been pretty rough in the reproductive health world. Couple that with some really questionable decisions that have been very consistently made through the pandemic. I mean, they're superstars. So Arizona Public Health Association, they do a lot of great work, a lot of advocacy, a lot of kind of connecting and unifying the public health and healthcare communities here in Arizona. And then the other group that I want to shout out is they're called Arizona Family Health Partnership. They're a private nonprofit. They've been around for a long time, I think since the 70s. Very active in reproductive health here in Arizona, both again in the advocacy realm, but also they do a lot to basically make reproductive health in Arizona accessible and equitable. And so both providing services, funding and training service providers, but then also the education, kind of both community education, provider education that they provide on everything from, again, the nuts and bolts, but also how you access services, where services are, again, making things more accessible, because that's another huge issue in a state like Arizona, where we have high rates of poverty, high rates of people who are uninsured, and reproductive health tends to be really vulnerable to that, because a lot of people view it as kind of it's a nice to have, not a need to have. The example I always give is if I'm diabetic and I'm on hormonal birth control and I don't have insurance, I'm paying out of pocket. If I have to make a decision between those two things, I'm buying my insulin. And so all the more reason that, coverage and accessibility of affordable services is really important. So Arizona Family Health Partnership and the Arizona Public Health Association.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We will see you back next week. Is there anything else you'd like to say to the audience?
I don't think so.
Okay.
No,
awesome.
Thank you.
We have many thanks for the use of our theme music, which is the song Drop by Ketsa. You can find more of their music online at ketsa.uk. You can also find Date These Guys online on Twitter and Instagram at Date These Guys, or visit datetheseguys.org. If you have questions for the podcast or want to be a wealthy sugar parent, send an email to datetheseguys@gmail.com. If you're looking to make an impact in the world, this show strongly recommends Planned Parenthood, a nonprofit organization that provides reproductive health care in the United States. Planned Parenthood provides birth control, long-acting reversible contraceptive implants, clinical breast examinations, pregnancy screenings, prenatal care, testing and treatment for sexually transmitted infections, and abortions. They also do great work for those who are lower income. 4/5 of their clients are at or below 50% of the federal poverty line. Both Joel and Naomi are monthly donors to Planned Parenthood. We hope you will be too.